to heat up your frozen dinners, grab your TV tray, and settle in for another episode of the Plus Platoon, your podcast for all things Disney Plus, brought to you by Disney Plus fans. Watch along with us every week as we cover all the new, the old, the good, and the bad on Disney Plus. So put down that remote, don't touch that dial, and welcome your fabulous Plus Platoon host.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Plus Platoon. We're a Disney Plus fan podcast that gives honest, spoiler-filled reviews of movies and shows on Disney Plus. We'll look at new releases, coming attractions, and we'll even go back into the vault to revisit some of the classic Disney that's on the platform. Make sure you're subscribed and you will never miss a moment. I'm going to bring in Kate. Kate, good to see you this evening.
Good to see you too, Derek.
And we got Pete this week. Pete, how's your week going?
I'm doing really well, except it's still so darn cold here.
Okay,
I've had
it's
enough.
literally 0 right now here. So,
well, it's...
What temperature do you all keep your heat on at? What temperature does your heat kick on at?
daytime or nighttime?
Either.
Daytime, it's usually 68 or 70. Nighttime, it's 64.
That's what we keep ours at, is 64, but it's 64 all day long. And I was told the other day, that's so cold.
Yeah,
and I was like,
freeze.
That is cold. We have ours at 69.
So
okay.
And yeah, like 65 at night.
Yeah. So
Got it.
But it's 10 here, so I guess it's warmer than you, but
it's warmer than here, yeah.
Yeah.
Guys, if you're not already, please like, subscribe, share. We got some fun shows coming up, including in a couple weeks, we have our 200th episode. So got a couple things planned for that should be a lot of fun. So this week we are watching the National Geographic documentary The Space Race. This covers the African American involvement in the space program as astronauts, from Ed Dwight being picked by Kennedy originally as one of the either the second or third class of astronauts. He wasn't in the original 7, obviously, but I think he was in the third set.
I think, yeah, it said the third.
Yeah. So third set are a bunch of the ones that did end up in the Apollo program. So it follows his story. Then it followed in the 80s when they brought in 3 more African Americans. And it followed their story throughout the 80s and 90s in the shuttle program. And then it picks up and it mentioned a little bit of some of the minorities in the space program today. So the Ed Dwight story is really, really interesting, I thought. So Kennedy basically made sure he was selected as one of the groups of astronauts as a quid pro quo almost for African-American support for getting him elected. Then he was in test pilot school. He got chosen as a astronaut. And then when JFK died, literally, I think he said it was like the next day, he was informed he was no longer part of the astronaut program. So
That sounds right.
my question is, and then they talked about how it was again then until the 80s when there were any more African-American astronauts. What do you guys think might have changed if Ed Dwight had been kept in the astronaut program? And Pete, I'm going to go with you on this one because you remember the moon landing. So
I was not born, but we'll go with that.
That was some shade thrown there.
I was alive for some of the moon landings. I will give you that. I don't remember them. I was very small, but yeah, I very much enjoyed this documentary, but I think it showed the times, which is in the 60s, there was still a lot of racism throughout, open racism, let's put it that way, throughout society. And, that went as far as the astronaut program. And even though Kennedy pushed this guy through, and coming from the president, it went through. No one wanted him there, right? I mean, that's the impression that you got from this documentary, is no one wanted him there. So let's assume in this scenario Kennedy isn't killed and he stays in the program. I'm not sure. You may have seen another African-American astronaut before the 80s, but because I think what happened is the astronaut program kind of fell off in the 70s for a while, because there wasn't really a space or as big a space program until the space shuttle came along. And then once the space shuttle came along, then they were more diverse, we'll call it. So I think that I think you might have had more candidates earlier, but it also wouldn't surprise me if he would have been still the only one until the 80s. So I'm not sure that much would have changed. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. To me, I'm not sure that even if Kennedy had stayed alive, I'm still not sure he actually would have been one of the ones that actually got to land on the moon, to be perfectly honest. I think it would have been I'm not 100, especially by the time they ended the space program, the moon program early. I'm really not sure, because 17 was the last one, or 16?
2016, you mean?
No, Apollo 16 or Apollo 17.
Apollo 17 was the last one.
17 was the last one. So they had into the 20s scheduled, but budget cuts and basically, and Kate, this actually kind of goes to a question that you were going to bring up later, but I'm going to go ahead and address it now.
Okay.
That basically,
will you let me ask my question?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about why they ended it, and then I'll let you ask your question. Okay. They basically ended it because budget cuts, and they weren't learning anything new at that point. There's only so many times you can bring back rocks. So now,
I guess, so the question that I asked was, why haven't we had more moon landings, especially with all of our technology? Because I just looked it up. There have only been 12 men to walk on the moon. And I guess it's just like, especially with things and the fascination of spacey things that people have in our country and in our world currently, it just surprises me that there hasn't been more like, no, let's do a webinar from the moon. Like, let's do a call from the moon and do, like, it just, I guess because of how bonkers our technology is, we have people living in space. Like, there's people living in space.
Right.
So I guess it just seems like there should go ahead, Pete.
I don't know. Derek, do you want to answer this, or
go ahead?
Is that a dumb question? Like,
it's not a dumb question,
okay.
but I'll give you my opinion.
Okay.
My opinion is there's nothing interesting on the moon.
It's gray rocks.
Except Captain America.
Except for Captain America.
Yeah, that was coming.
Yeah, except that is it uninhabitable?
Well, it's just as uninhabitable as satellites, orbiting the Earth or whatever, but it's a lot more work to send people there and to keep people there.
Okay.
So actually, if you look at what what they are working on is Mars, because I think they feel like there's actually things to learn on Mars, versus I think that the problem is, as Derek said, the moon is a big dusty rock with rock on it.
I guess we have such a fascination with the moon as, like, I get it. It's just a rock. I get it. But, like, I don't know. It just, anyway.
I mean, honestly, the only reason we went in the first place was to beat the Russians.
Yes. I honestly think
Not gonna touch that one.
I think if we beat the Russians into space with a man, I don't know that we go to a moon. I don't know if Kennedy's killed that we actually make isn't killed that we actually make it to the moon by the end of the decade.
So I guess the only point I wanted to add onto this question is I would hope, Pete, I think you both are 100% correct that civil rights and the facing the racism that was happening that people didn't want to face. You would hope that had Ed Dwight been in that team, that they would have been more respected, that it would have been a huge step for African Americans and people of color going into there was one quote in this movie that I meant to write down and I didn't. It was at the very end, and it was when he said, rocket science is easy. Solving or battling racism or civil rights is not, or something like that. And I was like, that's so powerful. I just thought that was so powerful of like, because everybody's like, it's not rocket science. Like rocket science is really hard. And when he goes, rocket science is easy compared to fighting for equality and civil rights. And I just thought that was really good. Anyway, next question.
All right. Well, yeah. And Kate, the other part of the reason we haven't gone back to the moon is the moon is, 250,000 miles away. The space station's 150 miles away. So
say that one more time.
Okay, if the moon's approximately 200 to 250,000 miles away, the space station is 150 miles away.
Copy.
So that's just how much more expensive it is.
I forget how far away the moon is.
Yeah.
Science was never my strong point, folks.
Okay, so this did go from basically the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo era up to the present. It didn't go real in depth on some things. Kate, was there anything you wanted to hear more about?
I would have liked to have heard a little bit more about the first Black woman. I would have liked for a little bit more.
You just kind of glossed over her.
Yeah, I would have liked to hear a little bit more about her. It covered pretty much everything. I found this documentary, I mean, I know we're not doing like, what do we like? What do we not like? But I found this documentary quite interesting. I liked that they talked about the Challenger. I liked that it made, because we got to know those three men so well toward the beginning. I like that it made the Challenger will always like be a tough point, like a sad moment in our history, but it made it even more personal because we had gotten to know those three men that kind of the documentary follows for the most part. Other than maybe a little bit more focus on the women, or even like maybe a little bit into the people of color that may not have been astronauts, but who were working in the like the movie Hidden Figures, like the women or the people of color who were also working behind the scenes, not doing the flying. I would have liked a little bit to have been touched on them as well. But yeah, I really liked it. Pete, what about you?
No, I'm actually glad they just focused on the astronauts, but I agree with you. Not just like more about the first woman, but like they spent a lot of time with the three gentlemen that were in the original shuttle program, but I kind of wish they had spent more time with some of the people that followed them. They just kind of like, here's so and so and here's so and so towards the end.
One of them for
and there was one, and I did like that section towards the end where he like the one guy who was up in space at the space station for a long time, like formed did you call it the Afronauts or something like that? That it was all the all the different black astronauts
I
throughout
loved that.
the program, kind of to form like a support group. That's what it felt like, right? It felt like a support group. I would have almost liked a conversation with that group, and how the people that came before led them to the or maybe led them to the program, or how they got to the program, things like that. But I thought the one thing I would say is, I mean, it was like an hour and 30 minutes. I thought it was a good length. I think any longer it would have dragged.
I
And
would agree.
I think they kept it at a length that you could enjoy it and not I didn't get bored, which is a big deal on documentaries, because it's easy for them to get boring at points. So
Yeah.
It is. I think the only thing I would have liked was I know that Challenger has been done a lot, but it seems like they didn't really get into anything type of personal information about the gentleman who died in the Challenger, or the African American gentleman who died in the Challenger. We'd like to see them go a little bit more about that, a little bit more about what was their reaction when they were chosen for the shuttle, because even then, I can guarantee you, even then in the South, it wasn't cool. But I also would have liked to see, okay, yes, and I know they were focused primarily on the African American story, but if you're really talking about the different, basically everyone who's not white going up, talk about the other races that have gone up as well. Talk about some of the Asian Americans. Talk about some of the people from other countries that have gone up with the U.S. people. So,
well, I love that they focused a little bit on the Cuban gentleman, who was he with the Russians?
yes.
yeah.
I love that they showed him, and they even had the three gentlemen, the Americans, were like, we didn't know who that was. No one covered it. It wasn't publicized. I thought that was so interesting that like this was a big deal that people are going into space, and like they didn't talk about him because he wasn't white. I'm so glad that they showed that, and that they focused on him, even though he wasn't American. I'm so glad that they talked about
Well, let's be honest. The press, particularly after the 60s, did not talk about what the Russians were doing in space, period.
That's fair.
So
That's fair.
So yeah.
I wanted to comment, Derek, on what you said about the Afronauts and how they had that Zoom call. And there was a part of me that was like, oh, tell me more about that. Like, tell me more of what was talked about on that phone call. And then I kind of had a moment of like, oh, it's not my business. Like, oh, that was for them. Like, that was for them, what they have walked through, what they face. Like, it's not for me. It's for them. So there's a part of me that's kind of glad they didn't, and that they kept it private. I loved that. Was his name Vince? No, the gentleman who was in the space shuttle during the George Floyd trial.
Space Station.
Yeah.
I don't remember what
I can't remember his name.
Sorry.
I love that he was the one in the space station when they did the Afronauts Zoom call. Which, the fact that you can Zoom call a space station is just like, what? Just crazy. But I really, really liked his story as well. I liked that he took the picture of George Floyd, and I liked that he, I think one of them said how much it meant to them to just look at the continent of Africa from the space station. Like, he's like, I just looked at Africa. Like, it just, my brain can't fathom how cool that is. And like, I can't, I want to meet an astronaut really bad. I think that would just be really cool. But yeah, there were so many little nuggets like that in this documentary that I really enjoyed.
Okay. Oh, wait, now, I think it's safe to say that all three of us are space program fans, that we kind of pay attention to it, follow along. I'm curious, what are your early space memories? What are some of the what's one of the earliest things that you actually remember seeing or learning about the space program? And just because we're going to go, furthest back to most recent, Pete.
Careful there.
No. I remember when they shot a monkey into space, and boy, was that exciting. No, really, I would say my first memories are really the launch of the first space shuttle Columbia is probably the earliest I remember, which I think was 1980. So I would have been like 10 at the time. So really the whole shuttle program was really what I saw growing up from NASA, right? I mean, as I said, I can't tell you I remember anything from the 70s era of it. Again, I was much too young for anything for the moon landing. So obviously, as I said, I remember that, when the Columbia first went up, or sorry, Columbia, when it first went up, the first few launches were all very big news at the time. They would be televised and everything. And then of course it kind of tapered off, but it would still often be televised because even when the Challenger disaster happened, I do remember that I was actually in science class in my high school when that happened. And they brought a TV in and had it, it turned it on after. They weren't showing the actual launch, but like as soon as it happened, someone came in and was like, "Oh, there's been a." So, we saw the aftermath of it very quickly after, and then subsequently again, it was almost 2 years before they launched again. So there was a lot of coverage when that happened again. But so really those pieces of it. And then, the other thing I guess I think about is visiting the times that I've visited down at NASA in Florida, gone out to Cape Canaveral and done the tour and things like that. And if you ever get the chance to, it is extremely interesting to see all that stuff in person. It's not something I would do over and over again, but I've done it a few times in my life, and it never fails to impress. Let's put it that way. I've still never seen a launch, darn it, though.
Okay.
In fact, the last time we went to the to Cape Canaveral, we were going for a launch. We were staying at Disney. We drove out, and like there was some traffic or whatever, and it was super overcast. And we got there before the launch, but you could not see anything. So you could only hear it. So we got to hear it. We got to hear the sonic boom, but we didn't get to see anything. That was just like a SpaceX rocket or something. I don't remember, but yeah. So I've never seen a launch there. I've seen it from Disney. I've seen the little light going up.
Yeah, and you
Pretty
can't
cool.
see launches from Disney.
Yeah.
So, for me, probably earliest thing is I vividly remember watching the Challenger explosion. It was on. I remember it was on CNN because the part of the reason the Challenger was so publicized was that was the Teacher into Space with
Right.
Kristen McAuliffe. That was, I would have been 5 years old at the time because that was 1986. So I was home still. My mom ran a home daycare, but my grandparents, for the entire time I was growing up, lived down in Florida, about half an hour north of Cape Canaveral. So I've always been a big space fan, and actually here in the middle of Kansas is one of the best space museums in the world. It's actually Smithsonian affiliated.
Where is that?
Hutchinson, the Kansas Cosmosphere. They're yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. They're the ones who did all the stuff with Apollo 13. They do anytime they're the ones that found and restored the Liberty Bell. So they have is going in the 80s and early 90s, Kennedy Space Center was not that great. The museum was terrible. But P, I will definitely agree with you. Now, with them having Space Shuttle Atlantis there, with them having the Saturn V rocket there laid out, it is, if you are going to Florida and have a day and take a full day to go see it,
Yeah.
Go, if you are interested in space at all, go over to Kennedy. We usually go, I still vacation down there a lot, both Disney and over at the beach. Every 5-6 years, we'll probably take a trip down to Kennedy just to see what's new. And there's some neat stuff down there. There's a space shuttle experience that you can, actually kind of get an idea on what it's like to fly. No, Kate. Think
Mission Space.
Green.
You know what's weird though? Mission Space Orange didn't bother me nearly as bad as I thought it would.
Huh. Anyway.
I know.
No. It's literally any G-forces is the seat literally kind of sinks, like the back of the seat sinks back. All you are is like here. And it's just like this is, and then it tips you forward a little bit and it tips you back.
So it's not spinning you.
No. There's no actual centripetal force at all.
Nice.
But it's really kind of cool. So anyway, where I was going with that is, I said, earliest memory for me is definitely the Challenger explosion. And then, Pete, I have seen several launches. I saw 2 shuttle launches, including one would have been 2009. So it would have been one of the later ones. This last trip, we were down there for a week and actually got to see 3 SpaceX launches. It was kind of cool at night. 2 of them were at night. So we'd go out on the sand and be able to watch them going up. And it's really kind of cool. So, Kate, what do you remember about? Now, this is probably going to be a little bit more recent.
But there hasn't been any big like moon landings or anything since I've been.
You remember Columbia?
Barely. Here's what's funny. I remember things about, I think we might have studied the Challenger in school.
Probably.
Because I kept saying, like, I remember the Challenger, but I couldn't remember the Challenger because it happened 2 years before I was born.
Yeah.
So we must have studied it in school. But I remember that Apollo 13 is one of my favorite movies. And I don't get disappointed in myself often. I have much self-love. But I am still disappointed in myself that I lived in Florida for almost 15 years and never went to the Kennedy Space Center.
What?
I know.
We're disappointed in you too, Kate.
I know. I cannot tell you the amount of launches that I watched from my house. Like, we had launches all the time. And we could, on a clear day, you could see them from literally anywhere. So I've seen so many launches. And I've always been fascinated with space. When I was in either elementary or middle school, I think it was elementary school, we went to Columbia. My hometown has it's called CASA, Columbia Aeronautics and Space something. And they have space camp. And I wanted to go to space camp. I didn't. I don't remember why. I can't remember. I don't know if we could afford it. It was pretty expensive. I'm pretty sure we couldn't afford it, but yeah, like
I was annoyed that my daughter didn't want to because I worked for Honeywell and I could have gotten her in and she didn't want to.
I just remember
Silly
very
artist.
vividly. I remember that like you could be an astronaut who was like fixing, or you could be a hacker who was the person causing problems for the astronauts that they had to try to fix. And I was like, sign me up. So, but I never, I think it was too expensive. I think is why I couldn't go because I was fascinated with it. So I've always had a fascination with space and with the idea of space and the idea of something more out there, which is why I want to meet an astronaut in real life If I could meet someone, although I was looking earlier that there's only 4 men who have walked on the moon that are still alive. I just feel like we're due for another moon landing. I just feel like we're due for it.
Sadly, you're gonna have to talk to Elon on that one because
no.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Just because NASA has actually said the SpaceX, the new Starliner, is actually the vehicle they're going to use to actually physically land on the moon.
I had a sorority sister who really wanted to be an astronaut. She really, really wanted to be an astronaut, but then they stopped doing a lot of I don't know if NASA lost a lot of.
I just saw that movie on Amazon Prime.
What?
There's a movie about a sorority girl that decides she wants to be an astronaut.
Really?
She lies her way into the program.
Oh God.
It wasn't great,
I would hope Amanda wouldn't do that, but I know she really wanted to be an astronaut, but I don't know if NASA like went through funding cuts or what, and it just wasn't going to be.
When the shuttle program was shutting down, they stopped getting new classes of astronauts for a while. I wanted to be an astronaut. I'm too tall. I'm 6'1". I'm too tall.
How tall? What's the limit?
Yeah, I think 5'10".
Oh, that would make sense as to why they said that all of the guys were 5'10".
Yeah, I mean, 5'10" or 5'11" is actually literally the height limit.
Oh, that makes more sense.
Okay. So there was, in this movie, they talked about how, maybe if they saw some African Americans in space, it might show that they, are more equal. And this is a question I honestly don't know if we're necessarily prepared to answer at this point, but I'm just curious what that next little frontier is. Is it still space of seeing? Because I know they've actually announced the astronauts that are going to be orbiting the moon and landing on the moon, and I think both of them have both African American and female astronauts in the cruise. But is that the next area where it needs to have a big public African Americans or minorities are just as the same as white people? I mean, it's and do you guys understand what I'm kind of getting at?
I get what you're saying, but I can't think of what it would be, and as you say, I'm not sure we're the right people to even answer that question.
I mean, taking race out of it, just looking at like what is a human race? What is the next big frontier? If it's not space, it's the ocean. Look at whatever it was, the people who wanted to go see the wreckage of the Titanic. I mean, people were fascinated with that. Yes, it exploded and it was awful, which also you probably shouldn't go try to make a sightseeing mission out of something that is a graveyard, but that's fine.
People do that all the time.
Like they do in Hawaii all the time.
Yes, you're right. But my guess, if it's not space, it would be the ocean, the depths. I mean, even like looking at how people have fascinated over this teeny tiny little anglerfish that came out and floated to the surface and like saw the sun, and it was so beautiful, and then it died. I think there is so much about the depths of our ocean that we don't have any grasp of. That would probably be, in my opinion, the next frontier.
Like the next scientific frontier.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. My initial thought was it's getting better, but still the representation for both minorities and females in movies, to be perfectly honest. Most of your lead actors are still on the big ones that get super promoted. There's not a lot of minorities as your male leads. I mean, and there's not a lot of female minorities that are your main either action lead or romantic lead. I mean, once Halle Berry was gone, there hasn't been a consistent one, at least that I remember.
I'll let Pete say it.
No, I just took Pete's.
No,
I was
I was going to say what Kate just typed. So
Okay.
yeah, I was just gonna say, man, it would be really nice to see a female president. That would be kind of cool.
I will be 100% honest. After the past 12 years or 8 years, I am not sure we will see that in our lifetime, Kate.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, but just saying, if we're coming down to minorities of any kind, be it people of color, religion, gender,
well, I don't think, are women a minority?
if you're looking at
Mathematically,
any
they're
kind of like,
That's what I'm saying. Mathematically, they're not.
sure,
But yeah. I mean, in
power.
politics,
But in
they
politics,
definitely are. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see more women, especially in the higher ranking politics, such as the White House. It'd be really nice to see a female president. Yeah. Yeah. I'd also like more women CEOs. I feel like there aren't a lot of women CEOs of like big companies. It's seemingly always is white men.
Attention to that. I'm sorry. Because to me, I'm thinking the moon landing, everyone watched. All this stuff, everyone sees. Who really pays attention to who is actually the CEO of what company?
I mean, I can only name one CEO, and that's of Disney, and it's because I worked there. I mean, Pete, do you know the CEO of Honeywell?
Yeah.
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 Like it's
Indian gentleman.
we love that. So yeah, I don't know what the next big
But
frontier
yeah,
is.
not a lot of women CEOs. There are some out there,
There's not.
but it's not. And just in general in the executive force in general, there aren't a lot. But I think it's over the years things have improved in terms of equality and things like that in a lot of different areas. And it's hopefully will continue.
Yeah.
That's all I want to say for right now.
Okay. So as we always do, we do our shows that we've watched on cups of pixie dust from 1 to 5. Kate, for the space race, what are you going to give it?
I'm going to give it a solid 4. I really enjoyed this documentary. I think Pete was right that it was a good length of time. It wasn't too long. It wasn't too short. It didn't drag. I would go back and watch this again. If somebody hadn't seen it and wanted to watch it, I would watch this documentary again. So I'm going to give it a 4.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3.5. Pretty close to the same. I definitely think this is worth watching. Well done, interesting, a part of history that isn't talked about a lot. And, so I was glad I watched it. So 3.5.
Yeah. I'm going to go with 3. Just keeping in mind that on my scale, my 3 is usually equivalent to about her 4.
Right. Yeah.
So
3 is pretty high for Derek.
3's for me. That 2.5, 3 usually means, like Pete says, I would probably watch it again if someone really wanted to. I would sit down with them and watch it again. I would do that for this documentary. So to me, I will be perfectly honest. As much as I knew about the space program, I didn't know about Ed Dwight. So, yeah, I thought it was very, very good. So, one we recommend.
Yeah, for sure.
Kate, no Disney Plus news this
No
week.
Disney Plus news.
But so next week we are going to be watching the original Sister Act. I think everyone has seen this probably at some point, but wanted a fun one, just one we didn't have to. Honestly, one that wasn't going to be a struggle, because I have a definite feeling that come up later in March and into April, there's going to be some struggle bus shows coming out. So, so that's what we'll be watching next week. If you have suggestions, we've got some openings in late March and early April as far as shows to watch. And then next summer, there's like nothing coming so far. Pete, a spoiler-free review of Captain America: Brave New World.
Yeah, so I just went to see it before this. I did enjoy it. I would not put it near the top or maybe even it's I put it towards the middle of Marvel movies. It was adequate. If that's to say, I was entertained by it. I do like Anthony Mackie as Captain America. I think he did a really good job. It felt very paint by numbers to Marvel. So if you like Marvel movies, you'll probably like this. Okay, if you don't like Marvel movies, I don't think it will interest you.
It's short.
It's relatively short. Yeah, it was only 2 hours. Only one post-credit scene, but they put it all the way at the end, so I had to stay for the whole credits. But yeah.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for being on, and we will see everyone watching Sister Act next week. Bye, guys.
Thanks for watching this week's episode of the Plus Platoon. Be sure to subscribe to the Plus Platoon podcast to keep getting great content each week. Then head over to Apple Podcasts and leave those 5-star reviews, as they help make the Plus Platoon visible to even more Disney Plus fans. Also, go to YouTube and like and subscribe to the Plus Platoon channel, where you can watch all future episodes live. If you have a question for the Plus Platoon, please send us an email to plusplatoon@gmail.com or connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @plusplatoon.
The Plus Platoon is a Disney Plus fan podcast and is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company or the Disney Plus streaming service. All opinions expressed on the show are solely those of the individual hosts and in no way reflect the views of the Walt Disney Company.
Thanks for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for next week's episode, because the Plus Platoon is to be continued.